Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here as usual and Phil here, kind of as usual now I suppose. Been with us for a few episodes now before we get some other people on the podcast. And we are talking about something that everyone I think is thinking about right now. At least 95% of marketers have this at the top of their mind, which is AEO, and in particular what content you should be creating for AEO in order to be cited and be found. And in this episode, we really want to break down the feasibility nature of creating all of these different kinds of content, the kinds of content you should be focusing on, what you should prioritize, etc., and really give you a kind of overview of what you should be looking to create in order to be cited. Before we get into the podcast today, here's a quick word from our sponsors, HubSpot. Think about listening to this podcast right now. You're probably multitasking and catching 70, maybe 80% of it. Now flip that and imagine only catching 20%. That'd be pretty crazy, right? Yet most businesses only use 20% of their data. All the important details in call logs, emails, and chats just left floating in digital space. HubSpot gives you access to those insights to help your business grow, because when you know more, you grow more. Visit HubSpot.com to get the full picture today.
AI has detonated like both information creation and consumption at the same time. Marketers have always moved in herds, which I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
We've gone after new interesting topics together. But the speed of this one is unprecedented, So, a few weeks ago, we were all thinking about SEO in, some pretty traditional ways. And now it's all about AEO. So we've got to get to grips with it, and we've got to figure out what we can do, to positively impact our results and our business in this new paradigm.
Yeah. Everyone is thinking about it. Like, if you mention SEO now as a term, like, people just look at you funny because they just think like,
old news.
Get with the times,
yeah,
mate.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still there, isn't it? But it just doesn't carry the value, the worth that it did a while ago. This is the new frontier that we've got to get to grips with.
And the thing is, even if it does carry some worth still, which I think it does, and I see from the data for ourselves and customers, like, they're still getting a good amount of high intent leads from Google, but it's just, the thinking is, how long is that going to last?
It's going to taper down continuously, isn't it? There's no real other way to look at it. It's going to diminish. It's going to whittle away.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be building up something new.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about AEO and the types of content you need to be creating in order to be found and served in large language models. And I think, firstly, let's talk about the areas of content to focus on. And I think the consensus is that you should be focusing on commercially orientated content.
Yeah, absolutely. And to some that might sound like a fairly obvious statement, but it's critical in AEO. In an SEO era, we needed informational content to get in front of people early in the buying process, to build like mental availability, brand authority and relevance with them, but also to create that commercial authority for our content so that we could rank highly for those terms. In this AEO era, the informational content doesn't carry the value, the worth that it did of old, because there's no brand brand presence amongst that content. People are just conversing with AI, getting the information they need, getting the answers they need, and really collapsing the value of that type of content for your business. Meanwhile, we've been listening, we've been testing, we've been learning, and we've been observing, and there is a consensus amongst people that I do trust that commercial content is where you can have a tangible, in the first place, hopefully measurable impact on results within AEO tools that also critically confer positive benefits to your business. Because there's lots of things you can do in marketing that don't benefit you at all, but this could be the way to optimize for AEO that also confers benefit to you, to your pipeline, to your business.
Yeah. And when we talk about commercial content versus informational, we're saying basically ditch the complete guide to this, ditch the what is this, the how do you do this, and focus on product and vendor orientated content. So Actually, we can run through that list that we've got in a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, I suppose that is what makes commercially focused content. It's not trying to give somebody the initial knowledge of a topic. It's actually, you know, when they get into the buying process, they've done a bit of research and now they're ready to go to almost vendor selection. That's the kind of content that you want to be creating to be appeared for.
Yeah, it's aimed at the part of the spectrum where they're trying to understand their options, you know,
Yeah.
trying to identify, compare, evaluate, and ultimately prefer solutions, vendors, providers. You know, so it's consistent with commercial intent to some degree from the SEO era. And it's down that end of the buying process where the research, the general information gathering, the research is done, and now we want to take action, we want to implement it. And they enter a different type of query once they get to that point, which will typically result in an AEO engine and an answer engine returning brands, vendors, and recommendations. That's where you want to aim your efforts.
Yeah. Actually, before we get into that table of content to create, let's segue a little bit into how to identify which queries you should be targeting, because this is where SEO and AEO differ quite massively, right? Because when it comes to SEO and keyword research, it was always fairly easy to get the data, you know, get some kind of gauge on what your audience was searching for, and then, you know, what keywords to target and what content to create in order to fit those in. AEO is a completely different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
Number one, you don't have the data available to you in order to actually understand what prompts users are using in order to actually get answers. Like that's a big gap that we have right now. And just the level of context and the length. I covered in one of the episodes that I did. It was a solo episode evaluating, you know, like 1,800 ChatGPT prompts. I can't remember what the length. There's a stat in that about the difference in length between prompt in ChatGPT versus a keyword search in Google, and it was ridiculously long. Like, I mean, outrageously longer. The level of context that you're giving makes finding queries and keywords different.
Yeah, absolutely. So the great way that I've heard it said is that within AI search, within AEOs, the volume on any query is simply one. You know, queries are so long, queries are so nuanced, so full of context, so unique that the volume on any query is essentially one.
Yeah.
Within SEO, we had huge amounts of correlation around keywords because users, the technology, and Google and Bing, you know, providers of search engines, all sort of understood symbiotically that that was the most effective way to get good results out of it. But that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
And now we've got this scenario where users can and will and are typing long questions, series of questions with loads of memory about them and personal context that totally transform the landscape. So there's no data, you know, hard data on which queries are being used most frequently, which themes and topics within them occur most frequently either. So that's not a route now to understanding. You've got to find new ways to establish what's being asked in your vertical, in your sector, that you can aim your content at.
Yeah, the best way that I've figured out to do this so far, well, the good thing is everything in marketing starts with a deep understanding of your audience. And if you're already doing a really fantastic job at understanding your audience, you should have, you know, your buyer journey mapped out, your personas mapped out, your ICP mapped out. You know, you'll have all of that documented. If you don't, you can create it pretty easily now with the help of AI as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you know, maybe we can overlay this on the YouTube video, but the way that I've gone about understanding the kind of prompts that buyers might use is by creating a persona simulation project in Claude, which essentially takes a load of knowledge documentation on our personas. So, you know, who they are, what companies they might work for, the challenges they might have, the solutions they're looking for, how they search, how they think, how they communicate, all of these different kind of inputs. And then basically provided instructions to use that knowledge in order to extract questions and prompts they would likely ask a large language model based on a particular topic or category.
Yeah.
And I've seen, really great outputs from this, like questions and prompts that you could realistically say, yeah, my buyers would be asking that. And it just helps you to, illustrate the kind of ways that your buyers might be using AI without, like, we don't have the data available to us. So for me, this is the next best thing in order to simulate that process.
Yeah, and it's really important as a way of increasing your confidence in what content you're going to create, right? There does need to be some targeting and tailoring around sensible, worthwhile queries, and these projects where you synthesize your buyer's point of view are really powerful ways to do it. And as you say, that's a great tool that can be used sort of continuously, iterated on from a knowledge, from an audience insight perspective, but it's available to you all the time. Whereas your ideal customer might not be on the phone when you need them every day, but a tool like this you can work with like in real time and come up with great content ideas. It's also going to be critical, and I mean, we're jumping around a little bit in this video already, but I think that's good. If you do go on to select a tool to try to understand your impact, you're going to need that knowledge as well. You're going to need those audience queries because they are what will be monitored. If you measure it. So we'll get back onto that later, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, tools are important. Tools are important.
But before you can measure anything, you've got to take action. And so, like, developing your understanding of your audience, critical. Building out a method of generating the types of queries that they would use, that's a really key point.
Because then you know what to create.
Exactly. Then you can start to produce the kind of content that's tailored to that audience with those queries in mind, and around their commercial needs and questions, which is what will get you the results, we think.
So let's actually talk about some of that content now and the different types you can create. And there was a webinar with Winter and Omniscient.
Really good webinar with those guys.
I missed, but you caught, and so did Chrissy. So I've watched bits of it back and kind of get the context from it. And they were throwing around some amazing, suggestions and ideas in terms of the kinds of content that is right to create for AEO. And I think we really just wanted to throw their list out there and, bring some context around it and think about how we prioritize that kind of stuff. So within AEO and commercial intent content, you have quite a lot of formats that you can choose to create content in that are typically served within AI answers. So you've got things like listicles that would be, the best X for this, the top tools for that. Large language models are serving content like that all the time.
They really are.
You've got reviews and comparisons between, different tools or different services, documentation or knowledge-based type technical formatted stuff. You've got product pages, you've got persona and use case pages. So that could be content directly mapped to a specific ICP or, context of use. You've got industry pages, which I'd probably almost bundle in with that one above, perhaps. Case studies, which, well, we can talk about these, but I'm not sure I'd call that out itself. I think
within the other formats,
you can bundle this together, right? Yeah,
that's where it's got value.
And then original data and research as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, immediately I think people will see, well, first of all, props to Omniscient and Winter for putting that together. People will, I think, immediately see and feel the fit between that kind of information and the responses that AI engines are giving, because they're picking passages, not whole pages, not whole results, picking passages that are really closely aligned to the requirements of the question. And so listicles where solutions are covered individually, one by one, fit that model, right? And they're being used extensively. I think comparisons could be really powerful because so many times they will be comparing one solution to another or to several. So again, it's a really good fit. And content that's aligned to specific, not just ICPs, because of course a company might have one or a small handful of ICPs, but the sub-segments within the
Yep.
ICPs, the specific niches, and different types of organization that make up the ICP, that's got really useful, that's got real interest as well. And I think to your point, case studies are a form of data
Yeah.
that can really differentiate one of those from another, make them specific and unique to that audience, which is a really powerful way to, build out this content at some sort of scale. Really powerful. Yeah, great list.
Yeah, right now, the easy one to get started with are these listicles, right? I do question the longevity of these, and how long we've got before. I think I've mentioned this in the last episode. Like ChatGPT, other large language models introduce some sort of trust-based signaling, but for now, listicles seem like a really great short-term way to get citations in AEO.
Yeah, that they indicate that they have the ability to produce a tangible, perhaps measurable, beneficial impact at critically relatively low volume.
Yeah.
As in, you can start to see this impact almost as soon as you start to create this content.
Yeah.
That's not to say that a large volume is not desirable. It is. One of the challenges with, answer engine optimization and the fact that queries have a volume of 1 is that content scale is kind of critical. But with this approach, you can nevertheless start to get some confidence back that you are impacting things.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to create ultimately at scale. And that's one of the considerations to make here, which is how much of each of this content do you need in order to have an impact? And like you just mentioned, that with a handful, a dozen of good listicles, you can actually start to appear for most of those queries within AI answers, if they're specific enough. Whereas when we get into like persona and use case pages, well, that really depends on the query that the user is asking and how specific the passages of content need to be in order to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a graph I think that all businesses ought to sort of have somewhere in their mind. I wish it was 2 axes, but it probably needs to be 3, which means it's hard to visualize, but we'll try. On one, you've got, the impact. What impact can this type of content have? How desirable is it? How large is it? How feasible is it for you to produce it at any kind of scale? And then on the third axis, what kind of scale is needed to produce the business benefit that you want to see? And all of these content types exist somewhere in that 3D space. And I think listicles, as you've said, sit in a very attractive part of that space because relatively feasible, relatively low challenge to create it, quick results potentially, and a good result. And then I think the next one to look at is those niche industry pages, or another good example to look at is a niche industry page approach, which is you might need more scale with more nuance and more differentiation to make an impact, but could that impact be bigger, greater? This is what we all need to sort of observe and monitor and see what happens.
People sometimes wonder like what we're doing, so we can share that. So right now, listicles has kind of been the number one priority because it's where we saw some early gains, I would say, in like position increases in AI answers and also traffic from AI engines. Thank you for that. Like I was surprised to see like 5% of our traffic now comes from AI sources. That surprised me.
That's brilliant. Thanks to HubSpot's new original source metric that we can see that quite clearly. Came as quite a surprise.
So listicles, for us, that includes like the best agency for X, the best agency for Y, the best service for this, etc., etc. Here's a quick story from us at Blend and our customer Daytel. Daytel were launching a completely new product in a brand new market with a different type of buyer. To do this effectively, they knew they needed to rebrand, overhaul their website, and rethink their go-to-market strategy. We partnered with them to achieve this, transforming their brand, rebuilding the site with their new identity, and working with them long-term to shift from lead generation to demand generation. The impact? 35% more revenue, 63% more profit, and 800% ROI from marketing. And to top it off, a HubSpot Impact Award to recognize the success that we had together. This is what happens when you have a partner who has strategic, creative, and technical expertise all working together. If you're in a similar place and want to discuss how we can help your business grow, just head over to blendb2b.com. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot podcast network that I personally never miss. Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. What I love about Nudge is that it's all about the psychology and science behind human behavior. What makes us take action, form habits, or say yes? And then it shows how those same principles shape great marketing and sales. In one episode, Phil looks at how just 3 words in a text message boosted vaccination rates and may have saved hundreds of lives. That's the endowment effect at work, a tiny psychological nudge creating a huge outcome. Every episode of Nudge is about 20 minutes, fast paced, no fluff, and packed with ideas you can actually use. Check it out. Nudge is available wherever you get your podcast.
And I think it's interesting. So, I mean, that's the approach we're taking, right? Blend as a company of the size we are, in the field we are. Contrast that a little with what HubSpot are talking about doing. You know, we've met with Asia Frost. We've had conversations with Kip in the past. You know, we've watched their podcast episodes and Luke presentations. They talk quite openly about creating these niche industry pages at scale, where their content is optimized for use cases, personas within ICPs. And that's their approach, which, as a business with a content engine the size of theirs, with, you know, at the scale they are, they think is a sound approach for them. But I do think that the right approach does vary depending on your scale and the capacity you have to produce these things, hence the feasibility concern that I have.
Yeah, I like the way you broke this down the other day, actually, which is when you're at a large enough scale, you can think about these persona and use case pages almost like, so you've got your category plus sector. So it might be CRM for manufacturers. And then you go down to the location. You've got CRM for manufacturers in the US. Then you've got CRM for manufacturers in, you could go state level. And then you've got CRM for manufacturers and you could go city level. And, you know, you've got all like this huge kind of diagram that's splitting out and getting larger and larger at the bottom. And then you can layer in things like size, you can layer in things like funding, you can layer in things, you know, like technology, all of these different nuances. And I mean, from what I've heard from like HubSpot and other larger companies with the scale, ultimately to be able to produce this level of content, is that they are getting very granular with these persona pages.
We've got to keep an eye on it to see, you know, what it looks like in the wild. But it's definitely an approach that some are taking. So I think those are 2 things worth considering.
I mean, like we've dabbled with these persona pages. I do think about the scale, and you know, that's ultimately why we diversify our content as well, because like all of this could change tomorrow. We don't know what algorithm, or is it an algorithm? I don't even know.
Model change.
What model change OpenAI are going to make tomorrow? We don't know. So all of this is kind of, you know, guesswork in some ways. We have the data, and let's actually talk about tools next. But yeah, we've kind of dabbled with persona pages and are able to track it to a certain degree and saw some success. And I think what helped in that was putting in case studies, like actually having data within that page was good, being very specific, saying who you do something for, like calling out the personas that are likely to be used within a prompt. If you can imagine somebody saying like to a prompt, to a large language model, you know, I am a VP of marketing in this industry, like you need to think about covering those things. So cover the persona, cover the typical profile that you might work with, who you work with, why specifically people come to you, and then cover off the challenges they might use in those prompts. Like if you can include all of that on a page, there's probably a good chance of being served for those answers.
Yeah, I think that aligns really well to what people are going to start using AI to do, which is like really prompting it to think about their unique challenges, like tools they use, like complementary tools they might be using, or competing tools they're considering. You know, case studies, actual data, these all align really nicely to that context-rich prompt query that, you know, serious AI users are going to use in their spades.
Let's talk about tools and tracking for a moment,
super interesting.
because this is really interesting and very different to how we typically track SEO, which was a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been trying out a few different tools, which I think, happy to name, Otterly being one of them, Scrunch we're demoing at the moment. Tried to get demos for Xfunnel and Profoundly, but haven't seen those yet. But we're getting a good range of kind of data and understanding of what these tools can offer now. And for me, the big difference is that data point as well. There's obviously differences in how you actually track all of these things. Tracking 2,000 prompts is different to tracking 5 keywords.
Very much so. Yeah.
But yeah, just the level of data available in order to actually see volumes and things like that is different.
My understanding of it, and I'll be interested to see if I'm right, based on what you've seen, is that these tools are all going to take the prompts that we provide as being our prompts of interest, or maybe help us generate them, but it's going to develop a set of prompts that we want to understand our visibility within. It's going to ask the AI engines that we want to track that exact question, or perhaps some iterations of it, but it's going to pose that question to the AI engine, not just once, multiple times, to develop a statistical, probability that you will be mentioned or cited, and then I dare say there's going to be the ability to sort of classify those citations, those mentions, and the degree of visibility. But it's interesting how closely these tools are mimicking our own behavior, as in, SEO tools had access to data that wasn't part of the user experience of those tools, but these tools are all relying on the very same thing we are, which is prompt the engine, assess the result back. Now, what they can all do differently is build on different layers of analytics and activation around it. So it'd be interesting to see what tools, become popular, and what tools meet businesses' different requirements. But it has been really interesting getting under the hood with them and starting to see what's possible.
Yeah. So what Scrunch do is they basically take your full prompt, which could, be 20 words long, and they condense it down into a slightly broader prompt in order to try and capture more of like the relevant things that might be going on there.
Okay.
Rather than just one highly specific thing. So they almost condense your really long prompt into something that might be more reusable across multiple users. And yeah, that's an interesting way to do it. What I really like about the tracking is like how they split out different large language models and see how you track on a daily basis against those, and basically give you like a green score or a red score if you're mentioned or if you're not mentioned. And looking at the trend to see like, okay, we created this piece of content here for this prompt. We're green, 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 or all of a sudden we're red, like what's happened there, or like we're green then red, we're green, like we're mentioned, we're not mentioned, like what's going on with that flip-flop there. And yeah, it really allows you to dive into basically track what we're talking about here with this content.
Well, and that's what's so exciting. I'm really pleased that we're getting close to having a tool that allows us to report back here about what impact we're having with these different types of things, because our objective is always to find a sound strategy that benefits us and then share that information with everybody. So really pleased that we're going to have some ability to measure and report on that. It's going to be critical. It's just a very new area. That takes a lot of fresh thinking about how you approach and tackle it.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to tools, a lot of these tools do the same things. I mean, they pretty much all do the same thing, actually, in terms of they just query the prompt that you have asked yourself. Like they go away and be the user using the API.
Yeah, the difference will be in how they present that information back, how they make it actionable, and what they charge you for it.
Exactly. Well, that's the big thing as well. I do think a lot of B2Bs won't be able to afford these tools and might have to work with agencies to get the answers, to get the data, perhaps.
Or most of these platforms are significantly more expensive than their SEO equivalents, aren't they? Yeah, that's a challenge for people. Makes it kind of hard to. It's not quite so democratized if it costs quite a big chunk of budget to get access to something to monitor your performance. Thankfully, HubSpot have released some tools to help businesses get an understanding of their visibility within AEOs. And you can run that tool over and over and over again. It's not incredibly practical, but it is there.
Yeah.
It is accessible. So there are some methods to get some insights and some data. But yeah, hopefully plenty of businesses can embrace a tool at some point. And hopefully there'll be some improvement in price position for these tools. At the moment, again, my understanding, and I could be proven wrong any day now, is that as you said, they're doing what we do when we use the tools ourselves. There's no API feed of this data that they can get onto, but that might change as well. Like you said, OpenAI could change things any day
Yeah.
and make things a lot easier or a lot harder
Yeah.
for us. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, you just don't know, do you?
Yeah.
One kind of closing off point that I'd like to end on is when we were kind of prepping for this episode, you made a really nice parallel to the adoption of inbound marketing back in like 2010, 2015, which was like you'd have a lot of conversations with people and say the best time to start doing this was, yesterday. And I think the same is true for this as well right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can remember actually that when we first started sort of helping businesses understand inbound marketing, they often came to us with the insight that they wish they'd started 2 years ago, or because in fact the best time was for inbound was years before.
Yeah.
Because it took time to build up a body of content. It took time to create the sort of gravitational mass that resulted in measurable traffic increases and pipeline growth and so on. So the best time was any time in the past, and the second best time was now. Now, and I do think we're in the similar boat now, which is, it's going to take time to create content that has an impact. But if you dawdle, if you wait, if you delay, now you're going to miss out on the opportunity to be building that body and to be having that impact. So do get started, because you'll regret that potentially quite significantly in 2 years' time when everybody's on board and everybody's optimizing and you're just one of the masses. This is the moment in time to be still an early adopter, a first mover, particularly within some segments other than marketing, and to potentially have outsized results from it as a result. So get on with it.
Yeah. And whilst this episode is focused on AEO, this podcast isn't focused on just AEO. It's just one component of demand generation ultimately. So, I would just say think about diversifying content massively, because we're just so unsure about what's going to happen with AEO, and there's just not that level of consistency that we have with Google and the updates and how it works and how algorithm changes might have had some impact, but they weren't catastrophic. Well, we just don't know right now, and I just think now more than ever is a good time to think about diversifying that content.
Absolutely. If you've got a budget, take a fresh look at it and split it between this and building your brand online, in other channels, in other formats, in other mediums, because we know that the businesses, the brands that are top of the shortlist when AI research starts to take place have an outsized potential to win that deal, regardless of what gets asked or served or learned within AI. So being that brand is incredibly valuable, and that's worthwhile investing some of your budget in, whilst this might be worthwhile a part of your budget as well. And I mean, this is written content for LLMs, right? This doesn't have to be a huge cost. AI can help you create this at scale. So this doesn't have to consume all of your budget, I don't think. And therefore, that does mean that you can be looking at other channels and other formats.
Yeah. All right, nice one, Phil. I think we should wrap it up there. That was quite I think there was a lot of information condensed in there. And a lot to think about when it comes to AEO. Hopefully that gives you a starting point at least, because a lot of people are asking the question, what content do we create now in order to be found? And hopefully that gives you some answers, somewhere to start from, and start tracking, see how it performs, and go from there, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, awesome. Let's wrap it up, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
This episode of Demand Decoded was brought to you by Blend. We help B2B technology companies grow through strategic, creative, and technical expertise, bringing you the capabilities you need to drive demand and turn it into real revenue impact for your business. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Demand Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a quick review, and we'll see you next time with more insight to help you grow.